Hello and welcome to Politics and Power Eastleigh Special. With the general election now less than 2 months away, we're going to be focusing an entire show on what could be a key swing seat, Eastleigh. But first, in the news this week. Top Gear presenter Jeremy Clarkson has been suspended by the BBC after an alleged fracas with one of the show's producers. The incident raised numerous questions, chief among them, what on earth is a fracas? Spending cuts to sixth form education could see students only in part-time. It came as a shock to see this story in the news, as many didn't think it was possible for students to do any less work. Thousands of people have signed a petition to bring back a balloon and flower festival to Southampton. The festival, which allegedly cost £70,000 to orchestrate, was axed in 2003, and reports of it being brought back have been dismissed as a lot of hot air. Coming up on the rest of the show, Stephen Slominski looks at the big issues with the voters in Eastleigh. I'll be joined by Ron Meldrum, the Green Party candidate for Eastleigh. Then Callum Moore Piper brings us the numbers behind the facts and asks whether immigration really is the big issue in Eastleigh. In the 2013 Eastleigh by-election, the seat became a hotly contested battleground, with the Lib Dems fighting off the staggering rise of UKIP. Then, immigration was billed as a big issue which would be decisive with the voters, but now our reporter Stephen Slominski gets under the surface to look at the key issues this time around.
You might think that Eastleigh was an old Hampshire market town, but it isn't as old as it seems. 150 years ago it was a greenfield site, and the town has only had an MP since 1955. It's a Victorian railway boom town created when the railway works migrated here from London along with its workforce. Over the last 100 years, the population has grown from 15,000 to 126,000. But the railway boom days are over, and the relics of Eastleigh's industrial past are now in the museum.
I think we had this continuing process of rebalancing away from what was the more traditional industries in the area. And that happened quite a few years ago, as we know, with the closing of the railway works.
With the factories gone, what kind of jobs are available?
We have a lot of availability in care sector, hospitality, catering.
But despite the loss of heavy industry, the town has record low unemployment and above average earnings. Though in the town centre there are still areas of deprivation. Support for the Labour Party declined along with industry, and the Lib Dems gradually squeezed out the Conservatives, so they now hold all 40 council seats in the constituency. Fears over housing and immigration saw a surge in support for UKIP in the 2013 by-election, but is it really a problem?
Eastleigh is a very homogeneous British white constituency. It's 96+% white. We are tolerant. We have a few immigrants. I'm married to an immigrant. She has never had any problems that other places might have had.
And in this area, Eastleigh, we are just, victims. We don't blame the people coming in from other parts of the world. Of course we don't. It's not their fault. Poor people want a decent lifestyle. It's nothing personal. And we welcome immigrants. But if we can't control our numbers, we will have nothing in this area apart from high-rise and no green fields apart from on the TV screen.
The Conservatives believe if they can dislodge the Lib Dems here, then they will be back in number 10.
To win an outright majority, we need 23 additional seats to what we have now, and I see Eastleigh as absolutely winnable.
And so Eastleigh is a small constituency and it's absolutely marginal. It's a key battleground in the forthcoming election, which UKIP want to win. The Tories need to win if they're going to get an outright majority in Parliament, and the Lib Dems simply have to hold on to if they're going to remain a credible force in UK politics.
And now I'm joined in the studio by Ron Meldrum, the Green Party candidate for Eastleigh. Ron, thank you very much for joining me. OK, so let's start off with what you think the Green Party's chances in Eastleigh are.
The Green Party's chances in Eastleigh, well, what we're trying to do is improve our vote in Eastleigh. You have to remember the last time anyone stood in Eastleigh was in 2001, and the Greens got something like 400 or 500 votes at that time. So what we're aiming at this time is to improve our percentage of vote. It'd be really nice to get our deposit back, which is 5%, and if we hit 2,000 votes, which most of us think is likely, we're going to do very well, and if we manage to hit 3,000 or 4,000 votes, we'll be very, very pleased indeed. And after that, we would hope to build on that over the years. But don't forget, the winning post is something like 13,000 to 14,000 votes. So we have a way to go, but we think we'll give it our best shot.
And in the by-election, it was quite tight last time between the Lib Dems and the UKIP, which are obviously quite opposing parties. Do you think the Green can do anything to either persuade some of the die-hard Lib Dems that have always voted Lib Dem and will always vote Lib Dem, or the far-right voters that went to UKIP?
Well, we've been out canvassing in Eastleigh and we've come across people with some very interesting views. Some people have said to us that they're actually fed up with the Lib Dems and they're certainly looking at voting Greens. And we've come across people who have the wrong idea, I'm sad to say, about UKIP. Someone came up to me and said, oh, we thought Mr Farage was like one of us. At which point I said, well, I think he was actually a banker who made considerable sums of money, and I think you should check it out. So that's interesting, different views we're receiving.
But last time where people were frustrated with the Lib Dems, they went to UKIP. Do you think that will change this time around?
In by-elections, you get different strange results, and often in general elections, you get people going back to their roots. So I would suspect, and other opinion poll systems are predicting that the UKIP vote will drop off. But wait and see.
So what made the Greens decide to field a candidate in Eastleigh?
Yes, we're trying to field as many candidates across the UK as we can. My understanding is there's now over 500 candidates standing across the UK, which is remarkable. I actually think it's higher than that. I heard 90% of the seats are being covered. And I think that we will be fielding more candidates than the Liberal Democrats. That's the latest knowledge I have. So we had an edict from the Central Party saying that they were trying to field at least 75% of the seats. In fact, we've done better than that.
Okay, and speaking of running more candidates than the Lib Dems, their success has sort of plummeted quite a lot recently, quite drastically, whereas the Greens have seen a surge in performance in the polls, they've seen a surge in memberships. Do you think there's a direct correlation between the downfall of the Lib Dems and the success of the Greens? Do you think that a lot of their voter base is transferring over to the Greens?
I think the younger vote is certainly transferring. We've got a very popular vote amongst the young people. I think what is actually happening is that the younger people have started to realise that actually we're going to be alive in 80 years' time when the environment is likely to see significant change, and actually that's going to affect us. And I think that is the prime mover. Certainly from the people I've been talking to, that's what's in their mind.
One of the largest criticisms that's perhaps still putting people off voting for the Greens is that there's an accusation that your manifesto isn't really viable, it's not really realistic. How would you respond to that?
I think they probably not understanding our policies. The policies are clearly laid out on the website, and I know that the media is pulling a lot of it to bits and putting different slants on things. And what I've actually had to do when they put different slants on things is go through and make sure I really do understand what they're going on. And I'll tell you the one, for example, the Telegraph came out with. They said that the Green Party was going to legalise drugs. Well, this is completely untrue. The Green Party is particularly looking at legalising cannabis, and the reason they want to do that is that it actually is used for medicinal purposes, and it's ridiculous to put people in situations where they need to take drugs for medicinal purposes and being illegal. So that's really what was behind that. That's just one example of what's going on. So from that, they've translated that into we intend to legalise drugs. It's completely wrong.
So do you think there's perhaps an issue with how the Green Party are advertising their policies?
No, I think it's the media who are out to get the Greens.
Okay, and then finally, what are your predictions for the Greens in the general election?
I think in the general election we will see many more councillors being elected across the UK. There's a possibility we could see a second Green MP in Bristol West with Darren Hall. That would be absolutely marvellous. And there's possibility we could see Leslie Graham being returned to Parliament in Norwich. That would be great progress for the Greens. I do believe in the long run we'll start seeing many more Greens come into Parliament in the following general election. But I am concerned because there's likelihood of a hung Parliament. What's also going through my head at the moment is actually will we have another general election within 18 months? I think we all need to be ready for that. In
the case where it was a hung Parliament, do you think the Greens would be willing to enter into a coalition?
The Greens won't go into a coalition. They will only work with people on specific policies.
Ron, thank you very much for joining me.
And thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming in. And now over to our data analyst, Callum Warren-Piper.
Under the spotlight of last year's by-election, Eastleigh, a battleground constituency for UKIP and the Lib Dems, became entangled in the subject of immigration and employment. However, when looking into the most recent figures, the speculation seems a tad ungrounded. Looking at the number of people economically active in the borough, Eastleigh has an above average of 87%, compared to other councils such as Portsmouth and Southampton on 75 and Isle of Wight on 76, which can only support why Eastleigh has a record low number of job seekers at the moment. So how come unemployment seems like the big issue? Isn't immigration a bigger deal? Let's take a look. The speculation surrounding Romanians flocking to the country after joining the EU seems to have vanished into thin air. The most recent figures since 2013 show the exact opposite to what UKIP believe would be a flash flood of immigrants, with less than 200 immigrants in both Winchester and Eastleigh, and only 369 in Southampton, with the number of Polish immigrants decreasing each year since in these areas all across. That's all from me. Back to you in the studio.
And I'm joined in the studio now by Callum, who, if we're sticking with the format from the last show, should have a mystery stat for me.
I do. The stat for this week is 736,000.
This, I believe, is the Jeremy Clarkson petition, sadly.
Shockingly it is, yes. Although everyone seems to complain non-stop about how they dislike Mr. Clarkson, 736,000 people have petitioned to get him back on Top Gear after the punch that he supposedly threw.
Yeah, which is odd considering we don't actually know what happened, and yet nearly.
Yeah. Well, what people believe and what the newspapers are saying is that it was over a steak.
That's rare, isn't it? Have a fight over a steak.
Yes.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Eastleigh.
Yes.
What are your predictions?
Well, like I said in my package, I think there's been a lot of scaremongering from UKIP, a lot of speculation about unemployment and about immigration, things that have been two very key topics in general election and the run-up to the general election. But I think these are unfounded. And I think that the Lib Dems can actually show a lot of work and a lot of action that they've done over the years that will most likely get them to hold the seat.
I mean, support for Lib Dems has plummeted nationally and they've had awful performances in the polls, whereas UKIP are doing very well. You don't think this will sort of have a reflect in Eastleigh, where last time we saw a lot of people very frustrated with the Lib Dems, which is why they turned to UKIP? Do you not think that's going to have a presence?
No, I think that in general elections, people go for both the policies that they know and the party that they know. People kind of continue to vote for the party that they voted for in the last general election. And I think that the Lib Dem policies are quite unique in the sense that they're very different from the Conservatives and Labour. Not so radical as the Greens and as UKIP, but that the support that they get won't change that much, and I don't think that they're going to lose, too much, so that they lose Eastleigh.
Then, having said that, we saw in the by-elections in Clacton and Rochester, they had two of their worst performances that they've ever had, like 2 record lows for the party. Do you not think that's a reflection on where the party's at and where they might finish in Eastleigh?
No, I hope that people won't vote for that they'll not just vote for the person, but they'll vote for the party. But even if they do, they've got a lot of action that Mike Thornton's provided over the time period since Chris being elected in the by-election, and all they've got on the other side is a lot of rhetoric from Patricia Culligan, and a lot of that being quite extreme. And I don't think that the floating Lib Dem supporters, let alone the floating Conservative, are going to be attracted to that. And I think they'd much prefer, better the enemy you know.
But then it was quite close between Lib Dems and UKIP last time. You don't think we'll see a similar story?
No, I don't think that the swing will be as much as people think.
Okay, and then finally, I guess, predictions for the general election generally.
Well, I do get asked this a lot, but I think that it comes down to the strange policy that we have in our government about holding majority. I personally don't think that any of the parties by themselves have enough to hold a majority, but then you get into the problems with which parties want to be in a coalition with the others. The Conservatives saying that they won't be in a coalition with Labour or the SNP, Labour saying that they will be with the SNP but not Lib Dems. A lot of this rhetoric and a lot of this chat, and then you just get them down to it as to whether or not anyone's going to hold a majority, and I don't think anyone will. And I think that will lead to a hung parliament.
You don't think the fact that the polls suggest people don't really like Ed Miliband, there's not a lot of support for him, and obviously there's not a lot of support for Nick Clegg, who are really the only major rivals to the Conservatives. You don't think the Conservatives will sort of win it by default?
No, because as much as they're trying to, the Conservatives are losing out to UKIP, and Labour's losing out to the SNP in Scotland hugely. 40% of the Scottish vote's gone. And I think both these deductions will kind of wither the actual whole party themselves, and they won't just hold a majority.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. And finally, we have our story of the week, our favourite news item from the world of news, which this week is the story that a 101-year-old man gets paid to eat breakfast. The Belmont restaurant in Manchester, New Hampshire, offers a discount to its customers based on their age, meaning that centenarian Joseph Nelson received a 7-cent refund after his meal of scrambled eggs, ham and chocolate cake. With increased taxation looking like a certainty whatever the outcome of the general election, the story is a welcome reminder that maybe there is still such a thing as a free lunch. And that's all from us on this week's Politics and Power. Goodbye.